Hello, thanks so much for being here. So my first question goes straight to the pandemic in Portugal. Portugal was initially praised for its quick, fast response to the pandemic. But recently, like many other European countries, the number of infections went up. The government had to kind of adopt some measures to bring the pandemic under control. In some European countries, though, throughout the pandemic period, the measures that were introduced created a bit of political chaos. But that didn't really happen in Portugal. So my question for you is, do you think that the collaboration between political parties, in this case, PSD, the Social Democratic Party, your party, and the ruling socialists, do you think that this collaboration between two parties can be the only way to win this battle against the coronavirus? And what would you have done differently to kind of fight this pandemic?
Okay, I think that there is a duty for every institution, also for the political parties, also for the opposition, to cooperate, to collaborate, to help the government in this fight against a common enemy, a very strong enemy. The point is the national interest. The difference is that in March and in April, I didn't criticize the government. Why? Because at that time we had no know-how, and I knew that I was not able at that time to do it better than our prime minister. So it was not fair, it was not honest to criticize if I was not able to do it better. Now it's different. Now I help, I cooperate with the government, but I can criticize because I know how to do it a little better. And therefore, this was and is now my behavior. It's not the only way, but it's a part of the way to win the battle. What would I do differently? I would plan it better. Not in March or in April, it would be impossible, but I would plan it better in July, August, or September, because we knew that we will have a second wave. We didn't know if in October or November, perhaps more in November, it appears in October, but we knew that. And so there was a mistake of the government when they didn't plan it so good.
Yeah. We just mentioned a bit ago that the number of infections are going up, but actually compared to other European nations that suffered a real impact in terms of cases, Portugal had a significantly lower kind of tally of cases, but the impact on our economy is going to be quite dramatic. And I would like to ask you, who do you think is going to be more affected by the impact of this crisis, and what can we do to make it less impactful on these people?
The biggest impact is on tourism. It's all over the world like that, but in Portugal we have a big dependence on tourism. Our economy has a big dependence on tourism. So the tourism is a big problem, and we have regions in Portugal like Madeira or like Algarve, and even Lisbon and Oporto, where tourism is very, very, very important. The restaurants, for instance, that has a part of tourism, but that also a part of the local people, locals. Because if someone is at home, is not in the restaurant. If the restaurant has to close at 10:30, it's a problem for them. Then the sector like clothing, for instance, if we are home, we don't need to buy clothes. And I visited an association of this kind of companies, and they told me that the sales are falling, but for instance, they sell more pajamas than other clothes. So it's also a problem for this sector. And all the sectors that have to sell something to these sectors. How to help? To help with public money is the only way. The problem is that Portugal has a very high debt, a public debt and an external debt. So every country has a limit, but our limit is bigger than the limit of Germany, for instance. We have we had 120% of debt in GDP, and Germany, for instance, only 60%. So if Germany goes from 60 to 80%, it's lots of money, and we are with 120%. If you go to 150 or 160% of debt, it's impossible. So we have the public money, but we have our limits.
Speaking about the high debt, there's this other question I have about the before the pandemic. And before the pandemic, internationally, and in a lot of international media as well, describes Portugal's economic success as a miracle, the Portuguese miracle. And my question for you is, was it really a miracle? Was it ever a miracle? And, did the pandemic come to show some of the fragilities of the Portuguese economy?
No, we had no miracle. If you look at the economic growth in Portugal in the last 20 years, this century, our growth is zero. If you look at our GDP without inflation, our GDP in this year, and you look at the GDP in the year 2000 or 2001, without inflation, is the same number, 3% more. Last years, we had some growth, a weak growth, but some growth, 1.5%, 1.8%, but 1.5 and 1.8% is not a miracle. The problem is that we had no growth before, and then it seems like a miracle, but we have no miracle. In any crisis, it would be logical that Portugal would show his fragilities. So our crisis now is not a normal crisis. It's not a big crisis. It's a big, big crisis. So our fragilities are all on the table, and we can see.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Speaking about the last economic crisis, one of the big problems in Portugal was, young people, qualified people, talented people. They had no option but to leave the country in search, for a better life, for better jobs. Many went to the UK, for example. Recently, some of them came back, but Portugal still, in terms of salaries, you still have the lowest minimum wage in Western Europe. Many people complain that jobs are precarious. In the pandemic, it's making things even worse. Do you fear that young people will leave again? And how can we encourage them to stay in Portugal, to help build the country back up after the pandemic?
Yes, I fear, and I think that every Portuguese has to fear that. But 7 years ago, 8 years ago, the last crisis, Europe was not in crisis. But now we are in crisis, and Europe is also in crisis. So it's not so easy now that a young boy or a young girl immigrates to Europe, to another country in the world, but to Europe, and it's not easy to get a good job now, as it was 8 years before or 7 years before. But you have to fear that. The solution is to offer better jobs and to offer better wages. How can we do it? The goods that we produce in Portugal, that we produce here, has to be goods with more know-how incorporated, so that our companies are competitive, not because of low wages, but because of the know-how that are incorporated in our goods. So we have to reform our economy. To reform the economy is the only way to offer better jobs and to offer better salaries in Portugal. Our average salary in Portugal is about 1,100 euros a month, and is a weak salary.
Yeah, and then hand to hand with the salaries also comes housing issues. So people's abilities to kind of live in their own cities has kind of been compromised recently. And there is a mix of factors, right? It's from inflation, tourism, the gentrification of the cities itself, and rents and house prices are going up in cities like Lisbon and city like Porto, where you were a mayor for many years before. Do you think that the pandemic could provide an opportunity to kind of tackle these issues and to tell locals you're welcome in your cities, you should live in your cities and have the ability to live in your cities?
Yes, we are in front of a big battle, but is always a silver lining. So here too. And we have here an opportunity to change this. And if the municipalities are able to be more rigorous when they will license the local accommodation, I think that we will be on the right way, and we'll have the opportunity in front of us and to balance all these problems. So here I would say, yes, we have an opportunity, and here the municipalities are very, very important. I was mayor in Porto, as you said, and I have no doubt that this is the task that they have to do now.
Mm-hmm. So for us to be able to do all these things, right, and introduce all these measures, we need money, like you said previously.
Money.
We always need the money. So if everything goes well, Portugal will receive some financial aid from the European Union to tackle the impact of this pandemic. I know this has been a topic of discussion, but in your view, where is the money most needed right now? This European money, where should it go?
I have no doubt in the companies for the reindustrialization of our economy. Why? Because of what I said before. We need better jobs, better and higher wages. The way is to transform our economy. And to do it, we need to invest. We need to help the companies to do it. So our first priority, I have no doubt, are the companies. The second priority, I would say, the public investment. The public investment was very low last years, in the last 5 years, I would say more, perhaps in the last 10, 11 years. So we need some public investment. The railway, for instance, on the ports, but not the first one. This is perhaps a difference between the government and my party, because they put perhaps the public investment in first place. No, first place are the companies, because we need more employment, better jobs, better wages. And then also the more priorities, but the two more important, first companies, then public investment.
Yeah. One last question. The EU 7-year budget has been on a bit of approving has been a bit of a roller coaster, has been a bit complicated. Hungary and Poland haven't been the easiest partners recently. What does this show you or show us, society, about the European Union and its future? And what impact could this have on a country like Portugal?
First of all, I must say that it's fair to say, it's honest to say that it's a victory for the European Union. Because it means that the European Union is able to face this battle together, to face his common enemy together. Without all this money, without all these funds, the theme on the table would be: is there any future for Europe? And the answer would be no, no future. So now is a victory for Europe. The problem of the rule of law with Hungary or Poland, the rule of law is and must be priority for the European Union. I have no doubt about this. The problem is, if this is the moment to mix the recovery funds, the funds that has to add to help the economy of the state members to recovery, if it's a good idea to mix it with the rule of law, even when we say, as I said, that the rule of law is very, very, very important. But it's all.
We are running out of time. Okay. I'm really sorry. Thank you so much for your time. It was a pleasure speaking to you. Thanks for all Web Summit speakers. And now we go back to Web Summit in Lisbon.
Okay, thank you very much.